However unusual it may be for a former US president, for Donald Trump, it's now a common occurrence. And so Trump is getting ready for yet another trial. And he has made yet another court appearance, this time in New York City, where the former president is set to face trial in a civil fraud case alongside his children and their companies. The trial, in fact, begins today and could have significant implications for Trump and his business empire. As usual, lashing out at the prosecutor, in this case, New York Attorney General Letitia James and Judge Arthur Engoron, who is presiding over the non-jury trial and made the fraud ruling last week, Trump said, "This whole case is a sham. See you in court Monday morning." And he is presently in court. Attorney General Letitia James brought the $250 million lawsuit against Trump last September, alleging that Trump and his co-defendants committed repeated fraud in inflating assets on financial statements to get better terms on commercial real estate loans and insurance policies. Trump inflated his net worth by as much as $3.6 billion in 3 separate years between 2011 and 2021, according to the Attorney General's office. Now, attorneys for Trump have refuted the claims, arguing that asset valuations are highly subjective and that they're still sorting through what the ruling means for the company's future. As we said last week, Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Arthur Engoron in his ruling stated that the defendants were liable for fraudulent practices in inflating the values of their real estate assets. The stakes in this trial are quite high. If found guilty, Trump and his companies may be required to pay substantial damages for their alleged fraudulent business practices. The trial will focus on charges of conspiracy to falsify business records, issuing false financial statements, and insurance fraud. One key point of contention is the recent ruling which cancelled the business certifications of Trump entities involved in this case. This raises questions about how these properties will be dissolved, the potential impact on his assets outside New York State, and whether Trump will attempt to transfer these assets to an out-of-state company. As the trial begins, the list of potential witnesses includes Trump himself, his adult children, and former business associates. While Trump had the option to waive his presence, he expressed his desire to testify. Additionally, figures like Ivanka Trump, Michael Cohen, and Allen Weisselberg are expected to take the stand. In the midst of the civil trial, remember, Donald Trump faces a packed calendar of legal battles, including criminal and civil cases. This even as he remains the Republican frontrunner in the 2024 presidential race. This trial is just one chapter in a complex and ongoing legal saga for the former U.S. president.
Donald Trump and the other defendants have committed persistent and repeated fraud. Last week, we proved that in our motion for summary judgment. Today, we will prove our other claims. My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law. And it is my responsibility and my duty and my job to enforce it. The law is both powerful and fragile. And today in court, we will prove our case. I thank you all for being here. And again, justice will prevail.
All right, so what does this case really mean for the Trump business empire? To dissect that, we're now joined by Ramakrishnan Sridharan, consulting editor with News9. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. As always, Sri, welcome back to Global Lens. Letitia James there saying, in no uncertain terms, the message is clear. No matter how powerful you may be, you're not above the law. And Trump, being Trump, has lashed out at the Attorney General, calling the case a sham. We believe that Trump is currently in this particular New York court, where the trial is set to begin today. What more can you share with us on that count? Also, how significant is this case, Sri?
Yes. So Mr. Trump arrived at the courthouse about half an hour back, Neha, where he spoke to the media, but obviously now he's gone in for the hearing. So there's only one sliver of good news for Mr. Trump in this, because the good news is so little, I want to dismiss it up front, which is that this is a civil case, which means he does not face any prison time, unlike all the other cases which he's facing in the US. He will not face any prison time, even if he's found guilty. He'll have to pay financial, penalty for this. Now, that is the only piece of good news. The bad news are tremendous. One, in September last year itself, the judge on this case had ruled, saying that there is evidence of fraud, that Trump and his team have committed fraud in terms of overstating the valuation of their assets. As one example, the judge talked about the famous Mar-a-Lago property that Trump has in Florida, where between 2011 and 2021, Trump organized the assessor there, the property assessor in the state, had valued the property at between 18 to 28 million dollars. But on the Trump organization's books, that particular asset, the Mar-a-Lago asset, was valued anywhere between 350 million to almost as much as 720 million dollars, Neha. So the judge has been really, really angry with the Trump team. In fact, even before Letitia James brought the case, the Trump team had tried to settle this, as they have settled some other tax cases in the past, and saying that we'll pay a penalty, but don't press charges. But Letitia James dismissed that, and this has gone into trial now. So the judge has been so angry with the Trump team and their constant denial in the face of what he thinks is compelling evidence, that he not only took the extraordinary step of basically canceling the certificate of registration of Trump companies, but he has also penalized the lawyers about $7,000 each for the a five-member team of Trump's lawyers. So that is how angry the judge is. And today, as the trial begins, Neha, it is not in front of a jury. It is only the judge, Judge Endragon, who's going to basically decide on this. There is no jury that's going to decide whether Trump is guilty or not. So and we already know the judge has said that there is evidence that you have overstated the property of, and you've defrauded banks and insurance companies. So today, when the trial starts, the only issue is how much money will Trump and his organization will have to pay as penalty for having overstated and overvalued the properties. The fact that he and his team have committed financial fraud is not in doubt, Nick.
That his team have committed financial fraud is not in doubt. But, if eventually found guilty, how serious are the consequences likely to be in terms of financial losses? Because some might argue, the shrewd businessman that Trump is, perhaps loss of assets is something that he fears more than even potential prison time. So tell us, what could this actually mean for Donald Trump?
Absolutely, Neha. So that is a big risk. In fact, Letitia James, who responded to Trump team's claim that his valuation ability was actually a mark of his business acumen, his genius, she said this is not the art of the deal, but art of the steal. So those were her words when she described, what the Trump organization was doing with these properties. So now, if he's found guilty and he has to pay, a penalty for the fraudulent practices, then the money could be upwards of $250 million. So that's up to the judge to decide and come up with a sentence. But I believe it could be a minimum of $250 million, because the overvaluation of properties is to the extent of $2.5 billion. So there is some metric which the Attorney General is using to claim a penalty in this case. The other implication for Mr. Trump is that he and his sons and any organization related directly to Trump or indirectly to them will be barred from doing any business in the state of New York, not just the city of New York, but in the state of New York. So earlier, there was a question of about, what happens to properties? Can he transfer to some other entity or maybe out of state? No, that's not possible, because once the case has begun, the New York judicial system will have absolute, a say on what happens to these properties, whether these will go into liquidation in case Mr. Trump and his, sons are not able to pay the penalties. Will then any of the properties be sold to recover the penalties that is owed to the state? So this is going to be very, very, it's going to be a big blow for Mr. Trump, Neha, because he has always built his personality, the Trump persona is built around the fact that he is a genius businessman, that he can turn anything that he touches into gold. So now with this, if these accusations and these allegations stick, then it's a damage to his reputation personally, although there's no prison time. But the fact that he built his reputation as, America's most successful businessman, a guy who could, knows the deal, I think that is going to take a big hit, Neha.
All right. I wonder if it would be more appropriate to call him America's most successful con man. But then, well, that's my opinion. Thank you, Shri, for all those details.